This week on Business Brief, how a rural Missouri town is feeling the effects of an ice raid. Then, a look at dark pool trading, a tactic taking stock trading outside the public eye. Welcome to Business Brief, Missouri Business Alert's podcast focused on business news and issues shaping the state. My name is Crystal Sanchez, and I'm joined by my co-host, Noah Grabianski. How are you doing this week, Noah?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing good. Should we get right into this week's news, Noah?
Yes, I think we should. Let's do it.
The Federal Reserve Bank kept its key interest rate unchanged this week for the second time in 2026. Fed Chair Jerome Powell cited the increasingly uncertain outlook of inflation because of the Iran war. Policymakers are still forecasting additional rate cuts within the year. The Fed reduced its short-term rate 3 times last year to a target range of 3.5 to 3.75%. Officials upped their projected inflation rate slightly to 2.7%, meaning they expect price increases to remain above their target rate of 2%.
Kansas City has begun receiving the $59 million in World Cup security funding it was owed by the federal government. The city was awarded nearly $80 million to pay for additional security personnel and safety preparations, but the partial government shutdown halted payments that were due by the end of January. The funding is coming from the still shut down Department of Homeland Security. The money is projected to go towards overtime for police officers who, in Kansas City, are being barred from taking vacation during the World Cup. With the help of a supplemental spending bill signed last week, the funds have begun to be sent to Kansas City.
A Missouri appeals court has ordered the state to issue 13 marijuana licenses to the cannabis company Hippos after a scathing audit of the licensing process was released. The state audit found that flaws including erratic scoring and poor documentation damaged the integrity of the results, meaning those who received license did so as a result of guesswork. The appeals court decision undercuts the typical process the Missouri Administrative Hearing Commission uses to resolve cannabis licensing disputes. The commission has already heard over 800 appeals from unsuccessful applicants.
Both state and federal funding programs for low-earning outcome degrees could be cut as a result of President Donald Trump's tax and spending bill. New federal rules target students earning degrees in low-income areas such as cosmetology or the arts, making less than the median salary of those aged 25 to 34 without a high school diploma. If degree programs fail to exceed that threshold for 2 out of 3 consecutive years, enrolled students will lose access to federal loans. State and federal sponsors of the funding cuts claim the legislation will hold higher education institutions accountable for poor graduate outcomes, as well as control student debt and degree inflation. Critics of the legislation worry it will lead to increased worker shortages in areas such as healthcare, social services, and education.
Missouri organizations received nearly $900 billion in grants from the National Institutes of Health in 2025. Down about 2% from the year before. The NIH claims that the dip in funding was a result of changes to how funds were allocated, and it also comes after months of the Trump administration stalling and canceling thousands of federal grants across the country. More than 1,400 organizations in Missouri received funding in 2025.
Missouri businesses sold more than $4.4 billion of cannabis in the first 3 years of legal recreational marijuana sales in the state, according to the latest official data. With that total, Missouri surpassed the revenue generated by the 7 other states who started legal recreational marijuana sales within a year of it. Missouri's sales since February 2023 have averaged $122 million per month, or $20 in monthly sales per capita.
Our first story comes from the people impacted by an immigration, customs, and enforcement raid a couple of weeks ago in a small Missourian town.
Now, Missouri has seen a significant increase in ICE activity since last year, but it's mainly being reported in the state's metropolitan areas like Kansas City or St. Louis. So, when you visited the town of Milan last week, what nuances there did you find?
Well, I was able to speak with a family who is struggling to make ends meet, as well as several local business owners who didn't open their doors that day.
And what's the mood in Milan been since the raid?
Sources have been telling me that there's fear in the air, and it's really hard to live their normal day to day lives after the target operation. Here's that story. Victorino Martin Chavez's wife started to worry at a little past 7 in the morning. Chavez usually arrives home at 7:15 for breakfast after he drops off 2 of their 3 children at Milan Elementary. The native of Guatemala was one of 3 people detained by immigration and custom enforcement agents on February 24th in Milan, a town of about 1,800 people in north-central Missouri. Chavez's wife, who asked not to be identified by name for the story, hasn't seen her husband since. She is expecting their 4th child. They are one of several families in the area who have been torn apart by ICE raids. The consequences leave households struggling financially and seep into the community's economy. 2 weeks later, the trailer home where Chavez lived with his wife and kids is filled with black trash bags. They contain the belongings of the family's adult daughter, Ingrid, who has to be identified by only her first name. Ingrid, her husband, and their 3 children moved in with her mother to support her financially. Chavez was his family's breadwinner, so his wife needs help paying rent, buying food, and making prenatal clinic visits. Ingrid's husband is now the sole provider for 9 people at a cost of around $3,300 a month. Chavez worked for CK Enterprises, where he sanitized the Smithfield Foods hog processing plant from 4 in the afternoon to 1 in the morning. The family was uncertain if they would receive his last paycheck. Axel Fuentes is a friend of Chavez who also leads an effort to help immigrant workers. He has helped gather funds from the community to support the family, but the aid is temporary. Chavez's wife says that as soon as her children's passports come in, she will leave for Guatemala to reunite with her husband. She is not the only one looking to leave. Others in the community are also considering moving, and local business owners are questioning what that means for their futures.
Regresar a mi país. Definitivamente porque
Go back to my country, definitely, because we are still living in fear.
That's the owner of La Bendición Pupusería, one of 5 Hispanic-owned businesses on Milan's Main Street Square. She asked not to be identified by name for the story. When she opened her dream Central American restaurant 4 years ago, she had so much demand that she moved to a bigger location around the corner. But in the last couple of weeks, her weekly revenue has gone down from around $7,000 to $4,000.
Yo realmente me atrevería a decir que si no hay latinos, no habría negocio.
I would go as far as to say that without Latinos, there would be no business.
Latinos make up close to half of the town's population. The day of the ICE operation, she was one of several owners who closed up shop for both the lack of clientele and the fear of attracting attention to herself. The owner of La Esperanza, a local Hispanic bakery, instructed his sole employee to do the same if ICE comes again. The owner of another small business, the Hispanic restaurant La Casita de Chave, estimates her sales have been cut by more than half after the raid. This accounts for her clients who fear coming in and getting their orders. She's also noticed that clients are having other trusted friends or families pick up the orders for them. When business dwindles in the small town and part of its population looks to leave, the economic situation looks bleak, Fuentes says.
Especialmente estos que son pueblos chiquitos, son pueblos rurales, donde hay mucha falta de recursos. Si no hay gente, no hay evolución
These are small,
económica.
rural towns that lack a lot of resources. If there are no people, there is no economic evolution. There is no progress.
Before being detained by ICE in late February, Chavez had lived and worked in Milan for 7 years. In an email, an ICE spokesperson cited Chavez's undocumented status as a reason for his detention. Since the day of the raid, Fuentes has continued to host workshops in homes and local businesses to educate people about their legal rights. He wants to empower people to continue to live and work.
Buscar el pan de cada día no es un crimen.
Finding the bread of every day is not a crime.
For our next story, we're diving into dark pool trading, a tactic being employed in the stock market by some corporations.
I've never heard of that. What is dark pool trading?
So, dark pools are off exchange trade markets that are intended for corporations to conduct these high volume trades without alerting the public of what they're doing.
And why are corporations choosing to do this?
That's exactly what reporter Braden Checky wanted to look into. He spoke with Bidisha Chakrabarty, a finance professor at St. Louis University, who recently co-authored a study on dark pool trading. Here's part of that conversation.
First, I guess just walk me through what is dark pool trading, the study you guys worked on, and all the results behind it.
A dark pool is an off-exchange trade. Off-exchange meaning that they do not, nobody can see where these orders are going and how they are trading. So 2 decades ago, they started. And that's because a lot of institutional traders like, Vanguard or people that actually invest money passively, these institutional traders do not want to send their trades to these markets like the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ, where everybody can see what they are trying to buy and what they're trying to sell, because they are sending large orders. So we wanted to study that. And very briefly, what we find in our study is if more trading happens in dark pools, that increases the risk of a stock price crash.
So how is that, like you said, like trading in almost private scenarios, how is that regulated?
They did mandate that dark pools release their data to the public, but what the data release happens at the end of each day. The fact that we have this data, and again, our data is from FINRA for this study, it's uploaded somewhere by FINRA, so it's not like very easily known where to get it. But if you know where to look for it, you can find that data. And there are some rules around dark pools. They do promise that they are going to take the prices from the lit exchanges. So suppose New York Stock Exchange is posting a bid price and an ask price at a particular time when a trade wants to happen in a dark pool, then the dark pool promises that they are going to take the best prices from the exchanges and do the trade usually at the midpoint of the best prices in the market.
What are some of the pros that behind trading in dark pools that could benefit the public, the public person rather than the corporations themselves, or the cons behind it as well?
So the way our markets are set up, retail traders like you and me don't have the option to decide which market we are going to trade in. My job is to go into my broker's portal and figure out what I want to buy or what I want to sell, and I click buy, sell this much, and at a limit order where I set the price, or at the market order where I don't set the price, they give me the best price.
What has been some of the major reasons behind this surge, like you said, over the past 20 years of dark pool trading usage?
We have had exchanges for over 200 years, and in 20 years, they have overtaken them. 8 out of 10 trades in the market currently, I would say, are happening via algorithms where machines are continuously monitoring the market and looking at where are the best prices, which stocks are going to, they predict, go up, or which stocks are going to go down, and accordingly buy or sell or take positions. If you are an institutional trader and you want to trade in that same market where these new breed of fast electronic traders are trading small sums, what you'll find, what institutions started finding, is that it becomes very difficult to execute a trade without creating a lot of price impact. And price impact is when the price moves away from you as you start trading. And I need to buy, 100,000 shares of a particular stock. If I try to send 100,000 shares order to the market, all of these high frequency and algorithmic traders who see that, they just keep jumping ahead of me and jumping ahead of me to buy because they think good news is coming. Why else am I buying 100,000 shares? You know, as they keep doing that, the price keeps going up. So I can't play that game in that market because I'm just going to end up losing money. So that is what was the genesis of dark pools, that it actually served a need in our market.
Do you believe that's fair to like the public eye to not know what's really going on for a stock they may or may not want to invest in?
Dark pools are really just another venue where you can trade, where you don't like the trading mechanism in the lit markets. Nobody's forcing anyone to go to a dark pool. Nobody's forcing anyone to go to a lit market. So it's sort of a buffet of choices we have. Depending on what are your trading needs, you can pick. I think your question talks more to transparency in the system. If half of everything that is going on in our markets is something that we don't see, is that a good thing? And there you raise a legitimate issue. One of the cornerstones of our markets is transparency, that we should be able to see what is going on. And dark pools are by definition dark.
It's now time for us to get into our words of the week. Noah, what's your word this week?
My word this week is tort reform.
I know that tort reform gets thrown quite a bit when the Missouri legislature's in session. So what's going on with it this year?
Well, Missouri lawmakers are now considering multiple tort reform bills that targets lawsuits regarding website accessibility under the Americans with Disabilities Act.
And why is it that lawmakers think that tort reform is needed?
So, if a website doesn't comply with the ADA, users can bring legal action against the owners of that website. Sponsors of the tort reform bills claim that these lawsuits are predatory against those website owners and don't give them enough time to respond by bringing their sites back into compliance.
So, the bills are looking to extend the amount of time these businesses have to respond?
Exactly. But critics argue that the bills will restrict access to the courts for those who feel that they've been wronged, and therefore limit the ability to enforce civil rights protections while protecting business interests. It's complicated, I know, but what's your word this week?
My word this week is a little easier. It's tiger tickets.
This sounds like it has something to do with March Madness.
It does. The University of Missouri men's basketball team is facing the University of Miami in the first round of the NCAA tournament, and tickets for the game are currently the most expensive in the country.
The most expensive, even with all of the other big-name teams that are playing?
Yup, and a big part of that is because the game is being held in St. Louis, so the Tigers are very close to home. The cheapest ticket on Ticketmaster as of Thursday morning was a whopping $226, more than the cheapest ticket to any other opening round games.
Wow. Well, with those ticket prices, I think I will just stick to watching at home this year.
For our closing thought, here's Axel Fuentes from Milan again, discussing the needs of small communities.
Mira, lo que tiene que cambiar es la forma de administración pública.
Look, what needs to change is the approach to public administration, specifically the application of common sense. We must recognize the actual needs of communities and cities. You can't simply assume that a small community requires the same things as a large one. And regarding the creation of existing policies and laws, I believe we need to tackle the underlying problems at their very root.
Well, that is all for this week. Business Brief will be taking next week off. The M33 Project provided the music for this episode. For my co-hosts, Noah Grabiansky, and editors Brianne Trimper, Kelly Durick, and Michael Stacy, I'm Crystal Sanchez. This has been Business Brief. Thank you for listening.